If your business can't run without you, do you really have a business or do you have a job with overhead? On this week's Profit with a Plan, I'm talking with Liz Weber, a top 30 global leadership guru for 2025 and a trusted advisor on boards, founders, and C-suite execs. She is not just going to hold back today, she's going to help us with tackling the real reasons why businesses hit ceilings and how to break through with leading smarter and not working harder. And today you're going to learn how to offload and what's in your head and build something sustainable. We're going to have simple systems that actually increase the value of your company and what it takes to grow a team without losing control. So if you're tired of being bottlenecked, this episode is going to show you how to step back without having things fall apart. Hey entrepreneurs, are you working too hard for too little profit? Well, welcome to Profit with a Plan podcast, where we help you scale smarter, increase profitability, and build a business that's worth more, whether you keep it or decide to sell it later on. I'm Marcia Riner, business growth strategist and the profit booster behind Infinite Profit. I've helped countless entrepreneurs to turn their businesses into highly profitable and sale-ready businesses, so they enjoy more income now and a greater payout later on. So join me for practical strategies, expert insights, and proven steps to make your business more profitable, more valuable, and built to last. By the way, today's episode is sponsored by Infinite Profit, where we don't just talk profit, we deliver it. But before we dive in, I have something special for you. And if you're ever feeling like you're doing all the right stuff, but not seeing the results that you want, it might be time for a fresh perspective. And that's why I'm offering a free growth and marketing audit. And in just one powerful session, we'll uncover opportunities to drive real growth for your business. If you're ready to make that impact, visit profitbooster.biz and get started. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Our guest today is Liz Weber. Liz is the founder of Weber Business Solutions and was named the 2025 Top 30 Global Guru for Leadership, and is a leadership advisor to boards, owners, and C-suite teams. She's a strategic and succession planning consultant, keynote speaker, and author. Liz helps her clients focus on the right things at the right time to get the right impact. As a result, their enhanced performance, they enhance profits, and workplace cultures. Liz, welcome to Profit with a Plan podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Marcy, I'm so happy to be here having a conversation with you.
Love it. If I can only get my mouth to work properly today, we'll be good. But so how, and I always like to start out and kind of figure out where your background came from. A lot of us either come out of corporate or we've all just been this entrepreneur from the start. How did you get into leadership guidance?
Well, I started out actually coming out of college, and my degree was in international business, and I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Wisconsin. And coming from the Midwest, I couldn't get a job in international business without international experience. So I was in this catch-22. So I, through great good fortune, got an internship with the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. Wow. And the office I was in was basically the military version, the State Department version of the military commissary system. So it was a business office. So from the time I was 22, I was immediately put into a situation where I was helping to figure out how to get food for 500 families in the middle of, Tanzania to help at the American Embassy or consulate at that location, and also 129 locations around the world. And so at a very young age, I was put into a situation because of limited staffing at that time in the office. I was one of the key staff members. And so I was put into a leadership role very, very early. In that capacity also, I was quite often briefing ambassadors, briefing deputy chief submissions, DCMs, and oftentimes briefing inspector general teams before they would go to the different embassies and consulates and conduct audits. So I was put into a position between you and me and your listeners that I was highly unqualified for initially. and had to kind of learn by fire. And so in the professional world, that's how I got my feet wet in leadership. But I will tell you, and you know, it probably resonates with you and probably some of your listeners as well. Um, Leadership is kind of in my blood. It's one of these things where even when I was in college, I took aerobics so I could, you know, make sure I stayed fit. But by the first semester after taking aerobics, I realized I wanted to be in front of the group teaching the class instead of being in the back taking the class. And I figured that way I could teach and make money and exercise at the same time. So it was a kind of a trifecta. So it's a
Sounds like
long
it.
answer to, yeah, leadership has always kind of been in my bones. And then after 8 years with the State Department, I left and started my own business, started my own training company initially, kind of training every type of leadership topic from time and stress management to project management. And then my clients started pulling me into projects and saying, you know, could you help us with this project? Could you ultimately, then it got into, could you help us with our strategic plan and facilitate that exercise for me? And when that started happening about probably 25 years ago, all of a sudden everything just clicked. It was finally felt like I was with the right people, meaning I was at the right level of leader within an organization. Um, because I like the pace at which they work. I obviously like the authority they have to make decisions quickly. And it all just clicked. And that I'm fine. I found where I was supposed to be with my clients at the executive level, at the ownership level, at the board level.
I love it. You know, it's so nice when everything just feels right, you know, and I'm glad you found that early in your career. And that must have been amazing as a 20 something telling heads of state and ambassadors, you know, what the game plan was and how they were to execute it. I thought that was a great opportunity to really get your feet wet. And I can see how that translates into business today because you have to you can't just come in there and say, okay, here it is. It's my way or the highway, the way, you know, and a few years back, you know, business was actually run. It's now, you know, you really have to be diplomatic, right? In your approach and the way that you handle people of different generations, different skill sets, and to get them all motivated in a way to do what you really want them to do, which is help you grow your company.
Absolutely. You know, and the other takeaway, and this is something else I deal with my clients a bit, is that experience. And I have to thank my former boss for this because we would be walking down the hall to a briefing room. And as we're walking into the briefing room, he would turn to me and say, "Oh, by the way, you're going to run the briefing today." And I would look at him with horror on my face, but I was the person that had prepared the packet. So I knew the material, but I share that because it was one of those situations, again, learning by fire, but also for anybody that has imposter syndrome. It's one of those great things where in the moment when you have to be able to interact with others who are, let's be honest, they're just simply looking for good information from you.
Mm.
And so when they question you and they challenge you, it's not because you're a 22-year-old, you know, young woman. They were looking for information from me that they were going to be basing decisions on that would impact their embassy and the community that they were serving. So the reason for their challenges, the reason for their questioning was to make sure that the information that I was giving them was accurate. And that has been just so helpful to having that underlying foundation to always lean on when I'm working with my clients.
I love that. Important skill set to have. All right, so let's talk about leadership in a way that today's leaders, you know, in the small business community can really grab onto those kind of skills to be able to help their company and help their organization. And one of the areas that I think is super important is that they need to kind of step back a little bit rather than, you know, charging forward saying, I'm going to do it all, right? How do you get them to lead instead of be the tactician, I guess, is the word that's coming to my mind at the moment.
It's a great question, and it's one of the hardest things for
All
many
right.
of my, yeah, for
Give it a
many of
feeler.
my founder-led companies to initially learn how to do, because let's be honest, this is their baby, this is their livelihood, this is their retirement plan, this is everything. And you run the risk of handing certain responsibilities over to someone who, between you and I and your listeners, could screw it up and
Mhm.
cost you money or cost you a client. And so, for the best of intentions, they retain control of certain aspects of the company that they've done for years, that have generated income, that have generated business that has generated relationships and allowed them to flourish. And so it's a protectionistic activity. But in my conversations with my clients, one of the things that I'll ask them is, and you probably do the same thing with your clients, no doubt, is so what are your goals for your business and you? When you dream forward or look forward, what would you like this business to be able to do for you and with you? And describe that to me. And invariably with my clients, it's something like, well, I want to be able to sell it, or I would love to scale it. I'd love to turn it over to my daughter, or I'd love to be in a position where we could template this and we could have like franchises and I could have a location for each one of my children. And as we get their dreams to come out and be articulated, then the conversation is, okay, so in order for that to happen, you're not in any one of those pictures that you've just described. So now we need to start creating a map and kind of a line of sight of how do we now start creating a map so your daughter can start to step in and learn to do some of these things that you now do. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when you're visualizing her running it, she actually has the skills to run it. And she doesn't have to lean on you or call you all the time to ask questions of how to do it. She's fully capable in and of herself to do it. And honestly, it's simply helping them realize that, again, for the best of intentions, they're inhibiting their own dreams from becoming a reality. And so
Isn't
then
that the
it's
truth? How often do they go, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't expect that from you? Because they expect to be involved in everything. Like you said, they birthed this child, this
Mhm.
business, this ugly baby that they've created, right? And and now you're telling them, well, in order to have this baby grow up and move on to greener pastures, you have to be able to trust that this baby can function on its own without you holding its hand all the time. And I know that's a really huge gap and leap of faith that these business owners have to take, but it's absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. And I think the key component is to clarify what I do with my clients is clarify I am by no means suggesting that starting tomorrow you are no longer involved.
You're done.
Yeah,
Here's the
no,
hook.
that's not what the game plan is. The game plan is it took you 30 years to develop the skills that you have right now. I'm not suggesting we need 30 years to develop your daughter's skills, but what I'm suggesting is a couple of things. Number one, let's get very clear in what is the role you expect her to take over. So if you want her to be the next president, great. Then let's look at that role as president and really look at, given the type of company you are trying to build and you would like her to step into and build, what should the president of that company be able to do? And let's look at defining that position description and responsibilities and figure out which of those you are currently doing, which of those you're not currently doing, in which of those we can start to train her up to start learning how to do, so that when she steps into that position, she's doing the right things for that position.
Mm,
And we can start taking things away from you that make sense, that number one, as a president, you should no longer be doing. And when we move those things, we're going to move them to the position within your company that they actually should be at right now.
it-
Because you probably have some managers or team members who you are paying a salary to or hourly wage to who are not doing things that you're paying them to do because you're still doing them.
Mm.
And if you are frustrated with them because you think they could be doing more, they're probably not doing more because you're doing part of their job for them.
Ah,
So it's this cleanup that we have to go through. And I share with them, this happens to so many companies, particularly that are founder led, because as you move forward, you just naturally take things with you that you've done for years, that you know so well, you have all the connections, and it just works until people start leaving and it doesn't work anymore.
mm.
So it's time to do a cleanup of the positions in the company. What are you doing? What do you need some of your other managers and leadership team members to be doing, or others within the company? And how might we start to logically reassign some of the responsibilities and help them be successful at those responsibilities?
I think that is a fantastic way to look at it. You've given them this like visual dream that they want, that their desire is, right? And whether daughter steps in or not, somebody's going to step in the future. And especially with companies these days, there's no reason to just close the doors when you decide to retire. So I love this vision that you create with them and you get them to start to see and feel that. And then you hit them with the, oh, well, let's create like a framework, right? A strategy, a plan that would start to softly move you into that change word and have those positions aligned, right? I mean, that's what I'm hearing is that the business owner, the founder-led company, which many companies start out as, they can't continue forever. So you've got to be able to put other people in place in those roles. And, forgive me, when we started our business, we didn't think we were working, 60 to 80 hours a week anyways, right? We wanted the freedom and the financial lifestyle of all these things. But as long as you're founder led and run and you're handling all those tasks, you're not getting the freedom that you wanted. And you're probably not getting the pay scale that you wanted because you're doing all the work. Are your podcast guest appearances leading to real business, or are you just hoping that listeners will take action? With the Profit Booster Podcast Monetization Hub, we turn your interviews into lead generating machines so that you capture, nurture, and convert listeners into paying clients. So stop leaving money on the table and get started today at profitboosterpod.com.
Exactly. Exactly. Or as I say, you realize you're handcuffed to your business.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and then, that handcuff it's not a golden handcuff, it's a handcuff. And it's
With the
also
worst boss and the
there
worst
you go.
employee, right?
Yeah.
Ourselves.
Yeah. And then you have this mindset, but there's nobody else that can do this.
Mm.
Well, there's nobody else that can do it the way you did it. It doesn't mean there's nobody else that can do it the way it needs to be done going forward for the type of company you're working to create. So you've established a good company. You've got a great momentum. It's just we need to tweak some things to allow it to go to the next level of growth. Because to your point, everybody kind of peaks out every now and then. And you can only work 60 to 80-hour weeks for so long before you burn yourself out, you burn out your personal life, and you burn out your business. So let's look at creating a better balanced team and a better balanced work culture for everybody.
I love it. And it sounds like you're starting to build these systems and people in place that will actually increase the value of the company, right? Because nobody wants to buy your headache. They want to buy a company that's functioning and going with a great leader in place.
Exactly. And exactly, and it's funny you say that because as you said that, Marcia, it reminds me of a client I had who owned a family founder-led business, and his two sons were in the business. And I worked with them for several years. And about the second year in, I was really starting to, I'll be honest, kind of bug them about you've got to get documented systems because right now everything is in your head. You're telling your sons various pieces of how to do things and it's not fair to them. And he was just not happy about it. And he's like, I don't want to create a bureaucracy, Liz. And I said, I'm not asking you to create a bureaucracy, just basic checklists, something to give some guidance here so you get some consistency. Well, long story short, it took about 18 months, but they got things documented. And I will never forget the afternoon he called me at my office and he said, Liz, I'm just calling to tell you that we've uploaded the final couple SOPs, standard operating procedures that we had created. And we've got everything documented right now. Granted, it'll change next week, but we got everything documented. And I said, well, oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you. And he said, no, I'm calling to apologize and to thank you. And I said, what's going on here? And he said, well, first off, I apologize for fighting you on this because I finally realize what this knowledge warehouse now is. This is a key to my company. This is what has the value when it comes time to sell my company. Is it's no longer dependent upon what I know in my head or what my sons might know in their head or what any of our managers might know or anybody else on the front line. This is how we run our company. And it just gave us this incredible flexibility to bring in new people as we need to. And if someone leaves, we're no longer frightened that we don't have access to what they knew. So he said, this is the key to my company. And it was just one of those goosebumpy moments where
I was just going to say, wasn't that the greatest thing you've ever heard when your client goes, what you said was exactly what I needed, and the big aha that he felt. And now that it's like, and I love the fact that he goes, I'm sorry for fighting with you.
but it was yeah, but it was that, but also he finally realized that was where the value of his company was, because when it came time, for him to want to sell his company, and he hasn't, he's passed it on to his two sons. But if he were to have wanted to sell the company, the value still would have been in his head and the hard assets of the company, which there would have had some value to it. But when you add the hard assets plus this knowledge warehouse of how everything is done, plus the transition time with him, I mean, exponentially, the asking price for the company just goes up dramatically.
Whether you're selling it or not, it's still a value, because if he needed to go get new equipment or he wanted to finance the building or something, they're still going to look at an asset value. And so that's why I always talk about, people always think, oh, well, I may not want to sell this. I may want to give it to my kids, but you still need to value it. And so I love how this actually comes into play, that these assets, the intellectual property, your knowledge of how the company is run and where the skeletons are in the closet, you've got that out of your head and on paper. So it makes it so much easier for the next line or the next hire to be able to take it.
Absolutely.
Brilliant, and wonderful example of a success story that I think owners need to hear every once in a while, that, yeah, this may be uncomfortable and it may be kind of a pain in the butt, or, it's not making me money right now, so why do I want to do it? But it does. It does in the long run.
Right. Well, and the thing with him too is I really wanted him to understand that when it comes to documenting procedures, it doesn't need to be this, big, massive project. I mean, like with applications like Scribe right now, you can document a process in 30 seconds. So there are a lot of tools out there that can help with this whole process.
Exactly. And you can get your team to document their procedures, so you don't have to know what your team's doing. But here's a great thing that I found about these systems that you have and these standard operating procedures and leadership as a whole. When you ask your team to document their systems, now you've got an opportunity to go, oh, Bob or John, I didn't realize you were doing that because Sue is doing that over here, so you don't need to do it. Or, oh, I didn't realize that was happening. That's brilliant. Thank you. Or, how could we improve this? You're getting that teamwork involved in the process of your company. And if John or Bob leaves and you hire somebody coming in, they can now run with it rather than you having to go in and sit and train them for 6 weeks.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing, and it was a natural progression from when I had the conversation with him about let's get clear on what your job is first. So when we have the conversations about what should each position be doing, then you look at documenting procedures for each position. what invariably comes out, and I think this is where you're going with that, Marcia, is quite often we had the conversations with, well, wait a minute, Bob, why are you doing that? That you shouldn't even be doing that. Marcia should be doing that. Given her position, she should be doing that. Well, but I've done it for the past 7 years. Well, that's great, but it doesn't at all belong in what you're being paid to do in your position. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say hidden skeletons in the closet, but just things that were so close to it, you don't even see sometimes how disorganized it can be. It's kind of like, everybody has a junk drawer, and you just know roughly where to find something in your junk drawer, but when you clean it out, it just makes life a whole lot better.
Brilliant analogy, the junk drawer. Holy cow. So you have just literally talked about a client that I'm working with currently. And there's one role that should be handled by one person, but it's literally handled by five different people in the company. One's doing a little piece here, one's doing a little piece over there, one's doing a little piece there. And it's like, oh my gosh, how do you expect the position or the functionality of the job to work when you've got five people, screwing in the screwdriver, and one person hammering at the same time the other person's screwing.
Mhm.
Nobody's holding it, it's just a mess. And they don't see it because that's how it's been for years, that, oh, so and so handles that part and so handles that. But again, if you don't look at it, you never would have realized it was broken.
Mhm.
Now that you realize it's broken, here's a question back to you. When you find that that's broken, how do you get the business owner to actually feel comfortable about transitioning those positions into the right role without losing his mind or losing control?
That's a really good question. And it's never been that big of a challenge for me with my clients because, to what you were just saying, Marcia, sometimes they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that." But you're right. Yeah, if Roger wasn't doing that any longer, he might actually have time to do what I want him to do. And he wouldn't be so busy all the time. And some of these real hard epiphanies start happening of, oh, that guess that does make sense. And in full candor though, there will be times where, oh, I really don't want to take that away from Teresa because she's really going to be upset because she loves doing that. Well, I understand that, but to somewhat of the analogy that you were just using, if Teresa's continued involvement creates more work than Kara and Tia and Marcella, then we need to have a conversation and move Teresa out of there and explain, look, you've been doing this great for a number of years, but it no longer fits with your function. We have to move this over here for efficiency, and we're going to have you pick up some other responsibilities that are more in line with actually your strong skill sets and those you serve.
Uh, yeah, that's a very can be challenging topic at the time to have with them, but I think bringing them into the space of going, well, look, you've been stressing about me asking you to get this done, right? And you haven't been
Mhm.
able to do it, but yet you're busy doing this over here that's not in line with what you should be doing, right?
Right.
I think that's I had a guest on before that was talking about the natural alliance of what we do based on our skill set and our internal functionality in life, and that we always work happier and better and stronger when we're in that natural flow. So I think that having, that kind of awareness, and that only starts with the leadership. It
Mhm.
only comes when the leadership goes, oh, well, now let's kind of look and see where everybody belongs, right? And what are the roles that they're doing. But I think this is a huge conversation that leaders can really start to delegate properly, have the business run smoother, faster, better, stronger, less expensive, more profitably, right? There's that domino effect that happens dramatically when you get your team aligned doing the things that they need to do, and it only starts with the leader and the
Exactly.
leadership role they do. So this is
Exactly.
a really interesting conversation, quite a bit um, fluid, right? Because the leader is not just trying to delegate and step back, but when you look at that org chart and you start to find the people in the positions that they should be doing, it takes some of the pressure off of the leader so that she can lead this company the way a leader should be rather than getting in there and swinging the hammer every day.
Exactly. And it's one of those things. I was kind of thinking about this as you were making your last point. And I think what I see more often with my family-led businesses and my family businesses that are still founder-led is those types of conversations and the reassignment of responsibilities is more challenging because it's personal. And so what has helped my clients is when someone like me or you comes in and can have the conversations around, this isn't personal. This is about what's best for the company and the family legacy of the company and its viability, to ensure that there is a business infrastructure in place with the right positions, with the right identified skill sets, with the right individuals in those positions at the right time to move it forward. And again, you've done a tremendous job creating this company and getting it this far. But for the next evolution of growth, now might be a really good time of being even smarter about who's doing what. And coming from an outsider, it's less emotional. They can blame me at dinner that night, but it also isn't, yeah, it isn't showing favoritism. It isn't
Right.
showing that type of stuff. And actually the one example I shared about the company owner who had the epiphany on the power of the knowledge warehouse that they had built. His two sons, the oldest one, obviously most people think, well, that's your heir apparent. But his oldest son did not have the business acumen. His oldest son was really good at hitting the golf course, creating relationships, selling business, schmoozing with the people. The
That's
younger
an amazing
son,
skill.
yeah, the younger son had the business acumen. And it was one of these things where, for whatever reason, they had a mental mind block for quite a long time that they didn't want to upset the oldest son because the youngest son had. And I said, I think we just need to have a conversation with both of them. And when the oldest son realizes that he's not going to be expected to take on that role, I said, I anticipate he's going to be relieved. And they said, you got to be kidding me. And we had the conversation. The oldest son, when I shared with him, I said, I think you're going to be better positioned to be the director of business development. And your job is to get out in the golf course and your job is to get out there. I mean, he just lit up like, really? That's what I get to do? I don't have to be in the office running the business. He was relieved.
Oh
And
my goodness.
as the parents, they were blinded by what they thought was a familial obligation to their sons. And when we had the conversation about, but let's just be candid with them about the objectivity of what we're trying to put in place to make sure your company stays viable, at least for another generation. We've got to put some safeguards in place, and putting the right people in the right positions is a safeguard. It just made sense for everybody. And it works out well when you keep that in focus of what is the objective of the whole thing. And from my family owned businesses, clients, it's keeping the business alive for the next generation.
And it's interesting. Even though they're not in some companies where it's still founder led, but they're smaller, tighter knit companies, there's still that emotional challenge of being kind of a family because they all put so much into it, right? Whether that's blood and skin, or if it's just that they've been there for so long that they think that they're part of it. I know that there's tons of challenges when it comes to being a strong leader in the company and making decisions, which I love this theme that we have here, is where's the future of this company? What do we see from it? How do we want to get there? And what's the next logical step in looking at that org chart and saying, how can we get some people in the right roles, doing the right things, right? And getting the right results that you want from it, which is beautiful. It really is. It's a very systemized way of looking at business when you've got teams, right? You've got the founder and the community, right? That you
Right.
have working for you. And this is a beautiful system that you've created. I think it's one of those simple things, but it's not simple, but it's so on point for what every business needs to look at, whether they're topping that million or topping that 5 million or topping that, 250,000, trying to get to the next level, is that you constantly have to look at this and say, how can the leader really truly lead and put that team in place to do the right stuff?
Absolutely. That's the challenge. That's the challenge. But it's, hopefully either themselves identifying what that future looks like, or having someone help them clarify what they see in their brain and be able to articulate it.
Love it. All right, Liz, this has been fantastic. I mean, really good stuff that we've discussed today around building the founder-led company and turning it into a team-led company. Where can listeners find out more about you and Weber Business Solutions?
Well, they can go to my website, which is wbsllc.com, or they connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and my call sign on LinkedIn is Liz Weber CMC, and Weber has one B.
So CMC, what does CMC stand for?
Certified Management Consultant.
There you go. Love it. Love it. Okay. So do you have, let's see, no, I think that's it. I think LinkedIn is a great place to really start to gather information, make your decisions as to whether this person aligns with you and can help you grow your company. And with your experience alone, but with your knowledge base and the topics that you discuss frequently, I think that's a great place to go.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right. So, listeners, I hope you found some really valuable insights and actionable ideas that help you turn your business into a more profitable business. And thanks so much for tuning in today. As I mentioned earlier, it might be time for a fresh perspective, and that's why we're offering a free growth and marketing audit. And in just one powerful session, we'll uncover real opportunities to drive real growth in your business. So if you're ready to make that impact, go visit profitbooster.biz. Don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss future shows. You can always find Profit with a Plan on any of your favorite podcast players. We're looking forward to more great profitable information on next week's show. So until then, make your plans and profit with them. Thank you so much, Liz. This was great.
Thank you.